Welcome back. We are discussing Kurdistan's push for independence. Joining us is Middle East Analyst at the lecture at the National Defense University, Michael Pregent, and Kani Xulam, the Director of American Kurdish Information Network here in Washington, D.C. Both of you, thanks for joining us. Kani, can I start with you by reading your leader, Masoud Barzani, in Kurdistan, saying, "The time is here for Kurdistan people to determine their future." Is this the best shot that the Kurds have had at an independent state?
I would say so, yes.
Why now?
Because the central government in Iraq is weak, because the Kurdish desire for freedom has been around for at least 150 years, and we have waited way too long, and we have paid a heavy price being subject people, and we don't want to be subject people anymore.
Now, Kurdistan isn't just northern Iraq. You're a Turkish Kurd, so what's to stop Kurdistan becoming bigger and wanting irredentist claims, say, in Turkey and Syria and Iran?
Well, the Kurds are not asking to take over the lands of Turks or Arabs or Persians. They are simply asking for their own land to be, and their own people to be granted, self-rule. It is not taking over Turkish lands, it's taking over their own lands.
Michael, you've been to the region, you've served in Iraq, you've seen the security forces of Kurdistan potentially up close, the Peshmerga. Do you think they have what it takes to hold on to their own territory?
I think thanks for having me, Nathan. I think they're very well positioned to secure their own areas. The Kurdish regional government, those territories, the Peshmerga, know who comes in the territory, know who goes out. Iraqis feel safe there. They go to Kurdistan to flee violence in Baghdad and other areas. So the majority of Iraqis, when they want to get away from danger, will actually move to Kurdistan because they know they'll be safe there.
There's a cry in Baghdad that basically the Kurds have taken advantage of the instability created by the now Islamic State, and even accusations of them helping the Islamic State. Do you think that Kurdistan is taking advantage of the current situation and will lead to the dissolution of the Iraqi state?
I think the Kurds were the only responsible security force left in northern Iraq after ISIS came in. The Iraqi security forces were primarily led by Shia loyalists or Maliki loyalists, and they basically went back to Baghdad. They weren't willing to stay and fight. And once you had that command structure dissipate, those soldiers followed. They went back to where they knew they'd be safe. They moved back to their neighborhoods. They weren't willing to necessarily fight absent that leadership that was in place. The Kurds, being the only responsible security force in the north, secured Kirkuk. They went in because nobody else was there. They secured the oil reserves, the oil fields.
You don't think they grabbed it?
I think Baghdad's happy that it fell under responsible leadership. They would rather have the Kurds in charge of it than ISIS. And you saw that with the Beji oil refinery when ISIS tried to grab that. They want these oil fields under responsible hands. And even though the rhetoric says Maliki's trying to push that the Kurds are working with ISIS, he knows that's not true. I think his main gripe is that they did not prevent ISIS from taking Mosul, but the Kurds had no interest in protecting it because they were removed from their positions in the Iraqi military in Mosul in 2009 and 2010. And they went back to the Kurdish regional government territories.
Kani, can I ask you, and then Michael, this question? This call for an independence referendum possibly in the next couple of months. Some have said, look, this isn't really about independence. It's about a bargaining chip with Baghdad. More oil revenues, greater say in the Iraqi parliament. But you think it's the real deal, right?
Well, I mean, independence is not just something happens because you want it. You have to also be recognized by the international community.
We'll get onto that, but within Iraq?
Within Iraq, I think 5 million Kurds. In 2005, there was an unofficial balloting going on. When Kurds voted for the constitution, Kurdish activists held ballot boxes next to the official ballots and asked how many of them would like to have Kurdistan be free. 98% of the people who voted for the constitution said if they had a choice, they would want to be free. So the desire is there, the wish is there, the hope is there. And the history hasn't been good. You know, central government has been brutal, has gassed the Kurds, has tortured the Kurds. And there's nothing wrong with being free. You know, when you have more freedom in the Middle East, you have more happiness in the Middle East, if you will. You have more stability in the Middle East too. The ones who don't like it, they're the prejudiced people, prejudiced ruling circles, and they should be, they should not have to say it all the time.
Well, before I throw it to Michael, let's widen it out then to the area. You know, who would recognise a Kurdish state? You know, as you said, Turkey has Kurds, Iran has Kurds, Iraq as well as Syria. These countries have traditionally opposed Kurdistan. The US, very lukewarm about it, except perhaps for Joe Biden, the current vice president. The only real country in the region that it seems to be encouraging Kurdistan is Israel. Michael, what do you think? Do you think the neighborhood could put up with a Kurdish state?
I think the neighborhood could put up with a Kurdistan if it just encompassed northern Iraq and not necessarily those areas in Iran, Turkey, and Syria. Yes, Turkey came out and initially said that they would be open to an independent Kurdistan, then walked that back. Israel followed, and then the EU a week and a half ago gave tacit support to the idea of an independent Kurdistan. As far as partition goes, nobody believes partition is the right thing to do because, unfortunately, all sects want the same thing. The Sunnis and the Shia both want control of Baghdad and Kirkuk. The Kurds simply want Kirkuk and the establishment of a Kurdish regional border where they could actually secure their territory.
Kani, sorry, I just want Kani to pick up on that point. Do you think that the neighborhood could put up with Kurdistan?
Well, about Kirkuk, the British, when they were talking to the Turks in Lausanne in 1923,
23, yeah.
The Turks were saying Mosul is ours, and the British went about doing a census. And in Kirkuk itself, they found out that 45,000 residents were Kurds, 10,000 were Arabs, and 35,000 were Turkmen. Saddam did a lot of gerrymandering, if you will. He did ethnic cleansing. He brought in a lot of Shiite Arabs, Sunni Arabs, and he even paid them to bring the graves of their old dead ones, so that he could say this is an Arab city. It hasn't worked. Today, Kirkuk has 12 representatives. 8 of them are Kurds, 4 of them are not. So a plurality, 66% is Kurdish.
But can you see Iran signing off on this? Can you see Syria signing off on this? Turkey? I mean, and also Israel is for it, so that usually means the rest of the Middle East will stand against it.
I mean, Israel, of course, has its own balance of power arguments at the back of its head when it sides with one side or the other side. As far as Syria has become irrelevant. Syria doesn't exist. There's no power in Damascus that can assert its authority. Iran is against it, but what will count is the access to the sea and the export of the oil.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because let's get on to that, because a lot of this is about oil. Kirkuk, a major oil center, one of the biggest in Iraq. We've seen the Kurds really get quite... we've seen exports of oil from Kurdish areas. We've seen export of oil from Kurdish areas, even though they're not quite a state yet. We saw a $100 million shipment. We've seen 3. Turkey has been storing some of it. Israel has. This has been declared illegal by Iraqis and the United States. Why are they doing this? This is a bid to create facts on the ground?
There's a thirst for oil. India is growing. China is growing, is demanding more oil. And I think there's a market for it. So eventually, there'll be a way to buy it and a way to sell it too. The biggest problem or the biggest impediment was Turkey. And the Kurdish leaders and Turks have found a way to give Turks 20% cut transportation fees. And Turkey thinks that's a good deal for them. We think it's a good deal for us. And I think eventually those obstacles will be removed because the central government in Baghdad is weak. It's not going to be able to stop it and also it's a source of income.
Well, Michael, let me put it to you, because the US have said, look, this is illegal. You can't export oil. This actually belongs to Baghdad. Do you think Washington minds will change?
Well, I think they have to say it's illegal at this point because they want the central government to work. So I would put quotes around illegal. The issue here is all the technocrats, all the people that can actually make this happen are actually in Kurdistan, and we see a central government right now that's not able to do a lot and not able to enforce a lot. So the Kurds are doing what is actually working and continuing to push the oil out of Iraq.
Yeah, but for the Kurdish state to survive, commentators have said they need to pump like 400,000 barrels a day, sell 400,000 barrels a day. Considering how much problems they've got selling oil on the open market already, and there's been tankers off the Mediterranean coast for months. Is this really viable? Can they do it?
I mean, I think the greater need, desire, or market for the oil is favoring the Kurds. There's a need for it. It's not like the oil is going to rot in the markets.
But also, Michael, this is to you. If Kurdistan does become a real entity, there's going to be a shared border with Sunni extremists everywhere. The security budget is going to go through the roof. Is this viable?
It's almost as if there's no other choice at this point. I mean, the central government is going to have to do a lot to get Kurdish buy-in at this point, and there's just simply no trust between the Kurds and the central government. So once the economy gets going and the oil starts flowing, of course they'll focus on the ISIS threat, but they're not going to focus on it alone. They're going to have support of the regional powers and also the international community. If you can establish a security base in the Kurdish regional government area, like right now we're establishing one in Erbil, to be able to go after ISIS using Kurdish intelligence and U.S. assets to go after them. I don't see that you can't do both. I don't see how you can't continue to improve your economy and still take out ISIS high-value targets. The Kurds are the best at that. They have eyes and ears everywhere. They are able to reach over borders, and one of the quotes I got from a Kurdish general I used to work with is, we're able to reach into places and slap people in the face when we need to. And I truly believe they have that capability to do both in concert.
Michael Pregent, a final word from you. Kani, do you agree?
I do. I mean, ISIS is not just a threat to the Kurds, it's a threat to the West too. And so that makes supporting the Kurds appealable, makes it, for a change, viable. And so the Western policymakers are looking at it as a positive thing.
Kani Xulam, Michael Pregent, thank you very much.